After giving birth, she learned her husband was transgender. She filed for divorce, until the truth changed everything. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and something sweeter, new life. Mara held her daughter against her chest, feeling the tiny heartbeat sync with her own. The baby's eyes were closed, her miniature fists curled tight, and for a moment the world narrowed to just this: the weight of her child, the exhaustion in her bones, the overwhelming surge of love that made everything else disappear. But everything else wouldn't stay disappeared for long. Her husband wasn't there. Ethan had left 2 hours earlier, claiming he needed to handle paperwork at the front desk. Mara had nodded, too tired to question it, too wrapped in the cocoon of new motherhood to notice the tension in his shoulders or the way he'd avoided looking at the baby too long. She didn't know yet that he wouldn't come back. She didn't know that in 3 days, when the hospital discharged her, she'd return to an empty apartment, half his clothes gone, his wedding ring left on the kitchen counter beside a handwritten note that would shatter her understanding of everything. But for now, in this moment, she held her daughter and believed her life was just beginning. 6 years earlier, Mara had met Ethan at a gallery opening in downtown Austin. She'd been 24, working as a freelance photographer, perpetually broke, but creatively alive. He was standing alone near a sculpture made of twisted metal and glass, his dark eyes fixed on it with an intensity that made her curious. "What do you see?" she'd asked, not because she needed an answer, but because something about him felt magnetic. He'd turned to her slowly, as if pulled from deep thought. Chaos pretending to be art. She'd laughed. That's every gallery in Austin. His smile had been small, but genuine. Ethan, Mara. They'd talked for hours that night, long after the gallery closed, and they'd moved to a diner that served coffee until dawn. He was a medical translator, he told her, fluent in Spanish and Portuguese, working remotely for hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. He traveled often. He kept his life private. He didn't talk much about his past. She found his mystery appealing. In a city full of oversharing, performative vulnerability, his quiet reserve felt like a refuge. They started dating a month later. He was attentive but never overwhelming, affectionate but never possessive. He respected her space, admired her work, made her feel seen without making her feel consumed. She fell in love with him the way people fall asleep, gradually, then all at once. But there were things she didn't notice, small things, the way he never undressed fully in front of her, even after months together. The way he'd disappear for days without much explanation, citing work trips that never quite added up. The way he flinched when she touched certain parts of his body, as if his skin held memories he didn't want disturbed. She chalked it up to trauma. Everyone had trauma. She didn't push. They married on a rainy afternoon in October, just the two of them and a justice of the peace. No family, no friends. Ethan said he preferred it that way, intimate, uncomplicated. Mara agreed, though part of her wondered why he never mentioned his parents, his siblings, anyone from his past. "They're gone," he'd said once, when she asked. "It's just me now." She'd held his hand and let it go. Pregnancy had been unplanned but not unwelcome. When Mara saw the positive test, she'd felt a strange mix of terror and joy, unsure which would win. Ethan's reaction had been harder to read. "Are you happy?" she'd asked, searching his face. He'd smiled, but it hadn't reached his eyes. Of course. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. So she did. The 9 months that followed were a blur of doctor's appointments, nesting instincts, and an increasing sense of isolation. Ethan grew distant, traveling more frequently, staying out late even when he was home. When she asked if something was wrong, he'd deflect. Stress at work, financial worries, the usual excuses. But there was something else. Something he wasn't saying. She told herself it was normal. Pregnancy changed relationships. Men got scared. It would pass. It didn't pass. The note was folded in half, her name written on the outside in his careful handwriting. "Mara, I can't do this anymore. Not because I don't love you, but because I've been lying to you since the day we met. You deserve the truth, but I'm too much of a coward to give it to you in person. I was born female. I transitioned before I met you. I never told you because I wanted to start over, to be seen as who I am, not what I was. I thought I could build a life where my past didn't matter. But it does. It always has. The baby isn't mine biologically. I can't father children. I used a sperm donor without telling you. I forged the consent forms. I lied about the clinic, the paperwork, everything. I was terrified you'd leave if you knew the truth. I know this is unforgivable. I know I've destroyed us. I'm leaving because I can't face what I've done. I'm sorry, Ethan. Mara read the note 3 times before her hands started shaking. Then she read it again. She stood in the kitchen, her newborn daughter asleep in the carrier at her feet, and felt the ground shift beneath her. Not because Ethan was transgender, she could have handled that, should have been told that, deserved that honesty, but because everything else was a lie. The donor, the deception, the forged documents. She'd given birth to a child whose biological father was a stranger, a man she'd never met, never chosen, never consented to. And Ethan was gone. The first lawyer she consulted looked at her with pity. "This is complicated," the woman said, her fingers tapping a pen against a legal pad. "The fraud, the forged consent, it's grounds for annulment, possibly criminal charges. But the child's paternity is going to be messy. You'll need a forensic investigation, DNA testing, a full legal review of the clinic's records." Mara nodded, numb. "And if I want him charged? For what?" "The fraud. Yes. But the rest," the lawyer hesitated. "It's murky. Reproductive coercion is hard to prove when the other party is no longer present. And if he's disappeared, he has. Then you're looking at a long, expensive legal battle with no guarantee of resolution." Mara left the office feeling hollow. She went home, fed her daughter, changed her diaper, rocked her to sleep. And then she sat in the dark living room, staring at nothing, wondering how her life had become this. 3 weeks later, a detective called. "Mrs. Hale, this is Detective Romero with the Austin Police Department. We need to talk about your husband." Mara's heart lurched. "You found him?" "Not exactly. But we found something else. Ethan's real name was Emily Brennan. Before the transition, before Mara, before the carefully constructed life in Austin, Emily had been a nurse in a small town in Oregon. She'd been engaged once to a man named Daniel Corbin, a high school teacher with a reputation for kindness and a secret addiction to painkillers. The engagement had ended when Emily told Daniel she was transitioning. He'd taken it badly, very badly. 6 months after Emily left Oregon, Daniel was found dead in his apartment, an apparent overdose. The case was ruled accidental. But there were whispers, friends who said Emily had been there the night he died, that they'd argued, that she'd left him with a full bottle of pills and a broken heart. No charges were filed. No evidence was found. Emily disappeared, resurfaced years later as Ethan, and built a new life far from the rumors. Mara listened to Detective Romero explain all of this, her mind struggling to catch up. "You're saying she, might have killed someone? I'm saying there's a history you need to know about. And right now, we can't find him, which means either he's running, or what? Or someone found him first." The days blurred together. Mara hired a private investigator, a wiry man named Luis, who smelled like cigarettes and spoke in clipped sentences. He tracked Ethan's movements through credit card records, security footage, witness reports. Austin, Houston, New Orleans, Miami. Ethan was moving south, erratically, like someone running from something, or toward something. "He's not using his real name anymore," Luis said, spreading photos across Mara's kitchen table. "He's going by Jordan Mackenzie now, staying in cheap motels, paying cash when he can. But he's still using his old credit card for gas." "Sloppy. Why would he be sloppy?" Luis shrugged. "Maybe he wants to be found." Mara didn't sleep. She fed her daughter, bathed her, sang to her, but her mind was elsewhere, tracing Ethan's path, imagining confrontations, replaying the note over and over. "I thought I could build a life where my past didn't matter. But the past always mattered. It was the foundation everything else was built on, and Ethan's foundation was cracked from the beginning." She thought about the nights they'd spent together, the conversations, the intimacy. How much of it had been real? How much had been performance? And then, darker, what if Detective Romero was right? What if Ethan had killed Daniel? What if the man she'd married was capable of violence? Luis called on a Thursday afternoon. "I found him." Mara's breath caught. "Where?" "Key West. He's staying at a motel near the marina." "But Mara, you need to prepare yourself." "For what?" "He's not alone." The flight to Key West felt surreal. Mara left her daughter with a neighbor she barely knew, packed a bag, and boarded a plane without fully understanding what she was doing. She needed answers. She needed to see his face. She needed to know why. The motel was a squat, sun-bleached building 2 blocks from the water. Palm trees swayed in the humid breeze, and the air smelled like salt and gasoline. Mara stood in the parking lot, staring at the door Luis had pointed out, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. The door opened. Ethan stood there, thinner than she remembered, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Behind him, sitting on the edge of the bed, was a woman Mara didn't recognize, dark-haired, sharp-featured, watching her with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Mara," Ethan said quietly, "you shouldn't have come. Who is she?" Mara's voice was steadier than she felt. The woman stood. "I'm Rebecca." His sister, Rebecca Brennan, had been searching for her sibling for years. After Emily transitioned and left Oregon, she'd cut off all contact with her family, parents, siblings, everyone. Rebecca had respected that at first, believing Emily needed space to become Ethan, to live authentically without the weight of old expectations. But when Daniel Corbin died, Rebecca started asking questions. She didn't believe the overdose was accidental. She'd known Daniel, had seen how obsessive he could be, how controlling. But she'd also seen Emily's anger the night before she left, how she'd screamed at Daniel, told him she didn't owe him anything, that his weakness wasn't her responsibility. Rebecca hired investigators, followed digital trails, pieced together her sibling's new life. She found Ethan in Austin, watched from a distance, saw the marriage, the pregnancy. And then she saw the note. "I couldn't let you spiral alone," Rebecca said, her voice even. "He called me the night he left. He was falling apart. Suicidal." Mara's chest tightened. "You're protecting him. I'm protecting family." Ethan stepped between them. "Stop, both of you. Mara, I know what I did was unforgivable. I don't expect forgiveness. But you need to know, I didn't kill Daniel. Then why did you run?" "Because I've been running my whole life. From myself, from my past, from the people who couldn't see me as anything but Emily." His voice cracked. "I thought if I became Ethan completely, if I erased everything before, I could finally be happy. But you can't erase the past. It follows you." Mara stared at him, searching for the man she'd married in this stranger's face. "You forged documents," she said. "You made me a mother to a stranger's child without my consent. You don't get to play the victim." "I know." "Then tell me the truth. All of it. Starting with Daniel. Daniel had been Ethan's first love. They'd met in college, bonded over literature and late-night conversations, built a relationship that felt safe until it didn't. When Emily started questioning gender, when the dysphoria became unbearable, Daniel tried to be supportive. But his support was conditional. He wanted Emily to stay, to compromise, to be just androgynous enough without fully transitioning. It became a cage. Emily left. Daniel spiraled. He called constantly, sent letters, showed up unannounced. And then, one night, he overdosed. "I wasn't there," Ethan said. "Rebecca thinks I was, but I wasn't. I'd already moved. I cut all ties. But when he died, everyone assumed I was involved because I'd said things, angry things. Things I didn't mean." "What things?" Mara asked. "That he should stop acting like a victim. That his pain wasn't my responsibility. That if he couldn't handle me living my truth, maybe he shouldn't be alive." Rebecca flinched. "You never told me that." "Because I was ashamed. Because I knew how it sounded." Ethan's eyes glistened. "But I didn't kill him. He killed himself. And I've been carrying that guilt ever since. The motel room felt smaller with all the pain crammed inside it. Mara sank into a chair, her mind reeling. You used a sperm donor without my consent. I panicked. I knew I couldn't have biological children. I was terrified you'd leave if I told you. So I lied. I found a donor, forged the paperwork, convinced the clinic I had your consent. I thought if we had a child together, it wouldn't matter how she was conceived. But it does matter. I know. You stole my choice. I know. Mara's throat burned. Do you even understand what you've done? That baby is half a stranger. I don't know her father. I don't know his medical history, his family, anything. You made me a mother under false pretenses. You violated me. Ethan's face crumpled. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but sorry wasn't enough. Sorry didn't undo the lies, the betrayal, the fracture in Mara's reality. She stood. I'm filing for divorce. And I'm pressing charges for the fraud. I won't fight it. Good. She walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. Who's the donor? Ethan hesitated. His name is Marcus Hale. He's a medical student in Houston. I chose him because he looked like me. I thought if the baby resembled me, you'd never question it. Mara's stomach twisted. Did you ever meet him? No. Does he know? No. She left without another word. The flight back to Austin was a haze. Mara stared out the window at the endless expanse of clouds, feeling unmoored, like she was floating between realities. She thought about Marcus Hale, this stranger whose genetics were woven into her daughter. She thought about Ethan's desperate attempt to construct a family from lies. She thought about Rebecca, loyal to a sibling who'd hurt so many people. And she thought about herself, how she'd ignored red flags, accepted half-truths, loved someone who was never fully there. When the plane landed, she picked up her daughter from the neighbor's apartment and held her close. The baby yawned, oblivious to the chaos around her, and Mara felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. This child was innocent. This child deserved better. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Ethan didn't contest it. He signed over parental rights without hesitation, a final act of penance that changed nothing and everything. Mara hired Luis to track down Marcus Hale. He was 27, finishing a residency in pediatrics, unmarried. He had no idea he'd fathered a child through a sperm donation he'd made years earlier to pay off student loans. When Mara contacted him, he was stunned, then cautious, then, eventually, curious. They met at a coffee shop in Houston, two strangers bound by biology and deception. Marcus was tall and soft-spoken, with Ethan's dark eyes and a gentleness that made Mara's chest ache. "I don't know what you want from me," he said carefully. "I don't know either," Mara admitted. "But she exists. And you're her father, and I thought you deserved to know." He looked at the photo she'd brought, a sleeping baby with wisps of dark hair and tiny, perfect hands. "She's beautiful." "She is." They talked for hours. Not about obligations or legalities, but about lives, choices, the strange ways people end up connected. Marcus didn't want to intrude, but he wanted to know her, to be present, if Mara allowed it. She wasn't sure yet. But she didn't say no. Rebecca called once, months after the divorce. "He's in therapy," she said, trying to deal with everything, the guilt, the lies, the identity stuff. "I thought you'd want to know." Mara didn't respond immediately. Then, "Is he okay?" "Honestly? I don't know. But he's trying. That's more than I expected." Rebecca sighed. "For what it's worth, I think he loved you. In his broken, fucked-up way, love isn't enough," Mara said quietly. "Not when it's built on lies. No, it's not." They hung up. Mara didn't hear from Rebecca again. A year passed. Then another. Mara's daughter grew, curious, bright, fearless. Marcus visited occasionally, careful not to overstep, learning how to be a parent in small, uncertain increments. Mara rebuilt her life, piece by piece, letting go of bitterness one day at a time. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and her daughter was asleep, Mara still thought about Ethan. She wondered if he was alive, if he was happy, if he'd found peace with the person he'd become. She wondered if he thought about her. if he regretted the lies, or if he'd convinced himself they were necessary. If he'd ever truly loved her, or if she'd been just another part of the fiction he'd created, she'd never know. And maybe that was the point. Some truths couldn't be recovered. Some fractures couldn't be healed. Some people were destined to remain mysteries, haunting the edges of your life like ghosts. Mara had learned to live with ghosts. 5 years after the divorce, Mara received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small wooden box, hand-carved, and a letter. Mara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that every day I think about what I took from you. Your trust, your choice, your sense of safety. I live with that. I'll always live with that. The donor, Marcus, he's a good man. I knew that when I chose him. I wanted your daughter to have something good in her Dina, even if it came from deception. I hope that's some small comfort. I've spent the last 5 years trying to become someone I'm not ashamed of. I don't know if I've succeeded. But I'm trying. There's a photo in the box. It's the only one I kept from before. I thought you should have it. I hope you're happy. I hope she's happy. I hope you've both found the life I couldn't give you. Mara opened the box. Inside was a faded photograph. Emily Brennan, young and smiling, standing on a beach somewhere with wind in her hair and hope in her eyes. Before the transition. Before the lies. Before everything fell apart. Mara stared at the photo for a long time, feeling something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Ethan had been running from this person, this face, this version of himself that the world couldn't accept, and in running, he'd destroyed everything. She put the photo back in the box and set it on a shelf, alongside the other relics of her past, wedding photos, hospital bracelets, remnants of a life that felt like someone else's. Her daughter was 5 now, starting kindergarten, full of questions Mara didn't always have answers to. "Where's my daddy?" she'd asked once. "You have 2, Mara had said carefully. "One who helped make you, and one who loved you in a complicated way." "What's complicated?" Mara had kissed her forehead. "I'll explain when you're older." The girl had accepted this, the way children accept all mysteries, and moved on to the next question. But Mara hadn't moved on, not fully. She carried the weight of Ethan's choices, the betrayal, the grief. But she also carried the strange, uncomfortable truth that people were more than their worst decisions. Ethan had lied, manipulated, stolen her autonomy. But he'd also been desperate, broken, trapped between identities, and terrified of losing the one thing that made him feel real: her love. It didn't excuse anything. But it explained something. And maybe that was all she'd ever get. One night, years later, Mara dreamed of the gallery where they'd met. Ethan was standing by the sculpture, staring at the twisted metal and glass, his expression unreadable. She walked toward him. "What do you see?" He turned, and for a moment she saw both faces, Emily and Ethan, layered over each other like a double exposure. "I see someone who tried to be whole," he said. "And failed." "You didn't fail. You just lied. Isn't that the same thing?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached out and touched his hand, feeling the warmth of skin, the pulse of life. "I hope you find peace," she said. "I hope you already have." She woke up with tears on her face, and her daughter curled beside her, breathing softly. Outside, the city hummed with life, cars, voices, the endless churn of people trying to build something from the wreckage of themselves. Mara held her daughter close and whispered into the dark, "We'll be okay." She didn't know if it was true, but she needed to believe it. And sometimes belief was enough. The truth had changed everything. But it hadn't destroyed her. She was still standing, still breathing, still fighting. And that, she decided, was a kind of victory. Even if it didn't feel like one. Even if the ghosts never fully disappeared. Even if the past remained a weight she'd carry forever. She was still here. And that had to be enough.